everyone. My name is Jacquelyn Ardam, and I am the director of the Undergraduate Research Center for the Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences at UCLA. I want to thank the UCLA undergraduate research community for being with us today during our fourth virtual undergraduate research week. Throughout this week, we are excited to highlight different research stories and perspectives from our alumni and faculty. And today's speaker is Dr. Uhls, Dr. Yalda Uhls. Dr. Yalda T. Uhls is an internationally recognized award-winning research scientist, educator, and author who studies how media affects young people. Her peer-reviewed research has been featured in many news outlets, including NPR and the New York Times. As a big believer in bridging research and practice, along with many years of translational work for lay audiences, Dr. Uhls recently founded the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. And Dr. Uhls is also an adjunct professor at UCLA, where she does research on how media affects the social behavior of tweens and teens. At UCLA, she teaches a class on digital media and human development. And she's also the author of the parenting book, Media Moms and Digital Dads, a fact, not fear approach to parenting in the digital age. In her former career, Dr. Uhls was a senior movie executive at MGM and Sony. Her unique perspective is informed by her understanding of media content, as well as her scientific research on the ways media affects children. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Uhls.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me speak at the Undergraduate Research Week. My name is Dr. Yalda T. Uhls. I'm on faculty at UCLA. I will tell you a little bit about my background in the presentation, but I teach a class, an undergraduate class called Digital Media and Human Development. I teach it in the winter, class 167. And I also work with interns and research assistants at the Center for Scholars and Storytellers, which I'm going to tell you a lot more about. And I just want to thank the organizers of this great week and UCLA, which I have gotten 2 degrees at, and my undergraduate degree was at UC Berkeley. So I am a product of the UCs. I'm a daughter of Persian immigrants. And I will start the presentation now. So let me open up my slide and you can see me in the corner. And I'm excited to start sharing about the work that I do. So this talk is called Science and Storytelling, How to Make an Impact with Research. And it's actually a talk I presented at an organization called the Society for Research and Child Development. I presented it with a good friend of mine who is a executive at Disney, and she's wonderful. And we work together frequently. And so it was a really nice way to share the work that we do and how we make impact with research, science, and storytelling. So, as I mentioned, I founded and run the Center for Scholars and Storytellers, and we are based at UCLA. We are not a UCLA center, meaning that UCLA has funded us or we are wholly a part of UCLA. We are based at UCLA because I'm on faculty there. So we get to enjoy all the richness of UCLA, all the incredibly smart young people, and the great resources. We are in the psychology department, which, as many of you may know, is a very, very successful and well-known department, and I'm very proud to have gotten my degree here. And my particular degree is in developmental psychology. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. You already heard I went to UC Berkeley. Excuse me while I drink my coffee. It's early in the morning. So I started my career as a movie executive, and I was an executive at Sony. That was the very first job I had as a creative executive. And then my last job was at MGM, Senior VP of Production Marketing. So, and then I also produced. So in the span about 15 years of my career, I really learned about storytelling. I worked with writers, directors, and did very well in the movie business. But when I had kids, oh, I'm going to actually tell you about the very first movie I got made so you understand why I believe in the power of media. This movie called My Family, Mi Familia, which maybe some of you know, is a story about a multi generational family, a family of Mexican immigrants, starting with the grandparents who came here to the country. Little known fact, Jennifer Lopez's first film. She plays the young grandma before she was a grandma. Then it goes into the second generation and the third generation. And I really related to it as a daughter of Persian immigrants. This is a movie I'm very, very proud of. It was the first movie I got made, as I said. Um, but studios don't often make those kinds of films. If you go and you see what kinds of movies they make now, they really want to make broad-based appeal movies. So after I made this first movie, the other kinds of movies, I did make some movies I'm proud of, but a lot of them were just movies that were made to satisfy the studio machine. So when I got pregnant and had kids, I stepped off. And then, funnily enough, I decided to go back to school to get a PhD, as one does after 15 years in a movie career. And I found myself while I was getting my degree really, really interested in sharing research with everyone. There's an organization at UCLA in the psychology department called Psychology in Action. And I worked with another professor who she's a professor now, she was a student then, Dr. Kate Humphreys. And we worked very, very hard to turn this club that into powerhouse club that could sustain itself. And basically it has. It's nearly 15 years later, and Psychology Action is a very strong organization at UCLA which teaches graduate students how to translate the research they're doing for the public. A very important skill. And I'm so glad that the psychology department at UCLA recognized this important skill. And I even won an award. They decided to give an award, and I hope they still do it to people that really, really supported sharing research with the public. After I graduated, I wrote a book called Media Moms and Digital Dads. Again, that was all about sharing research with the public. This was a parenting book. As a parent myself, I have two children. I was very invested in sharing the research with parents to help them understand what the research says about social media and digital media. I also worked for the nonprofit Common Sense Media, partly while in school and after school. Um, and they are a national nonprofit, a very large and successful nonprofit that does very good work at the intersection of parenting and media. So then I launched the center in 2019, and it's important to know the center is not just me. There are many, many, many people that support us, and these are some of them. If you go to our site, you'll see that we have a team of staff members. We have people that consult for us and are contractors, and we also have fellows, who are graduate students that do work with us, and um, we also have research interns, so and supporters and collaborators. So really, we work and bring in many many people into our work, and there's no way we could accomplish what we do and have without that huge huge network and incredible staff. So what do we do at the center? So you'll see this is very much a mix of what I personally my career. So we bring together scholars, we bring together storytellers, and we do it and we bring together youth, adolescents, ages 10 to 25. That's what the National Academy of Science now currently defines as the age range for adolescents. So all of you, most of you anyway, are still adolescents because of the brain science. And we're at that intersection of scholars, storytellers, and youth, trying to bridge all these worlds because we believe when working together, we're going to have more positive impact. And our goal is to help develop research and tools that will support storytellers who want to craft authentic and inclusive stories, stories that resonate for young people, and stories that allow them into the process, which you'll hear about. Our mission: harness the power of storytelling so the next generation can thrive and grow. And this is some of the wonderful, wonderful adolescents that have spoken on our panels. And actually, two of these adolescents, Navia Robinson and Gael Ayator, in our advisory council, and they are amazing. So, why now? Why do I care so much about adolescence and media and storytelling and science? Well, you guys are a part of, this digital world, and it's more and more important than ever. There's so much information coming at us, and it's framed in many, many ways. We need to think, learn to think critically about the media that we consume. But also, I have a vision that the media that all of us consume has a positive impact on us rather than a negative impact. Sometimes we all feel overwhelmed and we're not sure who to trust. And adolescents in particular are consuming this media with their friends, and we want that media to have a positive impact. As a FTC chairman, Nicholas Johnson said many, many years ago, this was, I believe, in the late 60s when TV had just started. And there were a lot of people that were just saying, same as they say about social media now, oh, it's horrible. It's ruining everybody. It's rotting people's minds. But this guy said all television is educational television. The question is, what is it teaching? So we ask storytellers that, and we ask executives that. How can you create stories that have positive impact on young people, and focus on that, without losing the ability to do what you do best, storytellers, which is engage young people? So traditionally, media has been a scapegoat. You may not know, but even books were something that was considered a negative media around the turn of the century. And we found this great newspaper article that says, oh, boys are reading books and they're in the library. How awful. And as you know, now many, many adults claim that kids don't read enough. So it's funny in 100 years how we've shifted on books. And, once television came along, probably that's when the shift came. But, it's called a moral panic. Adults frequently think about media and all kinds of media, music, books, social media, gaming. They think of it as really horrible and ruining young people. And as you'll see here, Time Magazine, since the 70s, has really sort of been, and many other media are writing about this. And every time, there is something that they're upset about. There is some picture they use that's scary, and they talk about how negative these things are. And it's often a scapegoat, and blamed for some of the ills in society. So, if there's a school shooting, constantly, often the shooter does play video games, and some politicians will blame media as the culprit. And if you are in research, correlation doesn't mean causation. So, really, the research does not show that video game playing leads to shooting. Otherwise, everybody would be shooting people. Or in Japan, where video game play is much, much higher, there would be many more deaths. Instead, what this is, what we now know is there are many, many underlying causes. And this article really sort of started the conversation that smartphones and social media have really been a cause for the mental health crisis, which is currently happening. Um, but so that really has been building. There are a group of researchers out there that really believe that media is negative, that there's some, really negative impacts. And they have really started a conversation. And if you pay attention to politics, you'll know that there is a lot of people trying to do things like in Montana, they're banning TikTok. Some people are trying to lift the age too. So, what we try to do at the Center for Scholars and Storytellers is shift the conversation from one from protectionism, which is where we traditionally are in our society. We have to protect young people from media. We have to, as adults, we are the ones that know better. It's a very top-down approach. And we try to shift it to empowerment. How can we empower young people to use these tools productively, creative, safely? And, there's a lot of different organizations that are working on that. Part of it is teaching them education, critical thinking, what you're learning in college. And part of that is also working with the industry, the people that make the content, to help them understand the positives and the harms and help them shift their business practices. So that second part is what we're doing at the center. So why storytelling? Storytelling has been proven to change attitudes and behavior. So it is a really powerful way to cut through the noise of all the information that's being thrown at you. I've been a storyteller and now I study storytelling. I obviously believe in it, but the science also tells you this was a study that looked at cervical cancer and whether storytelling could shift behavior. So it looked at two different short films, an 11-minute documentary, an 11-minute story, and both of them had the same messages about getting pap smears, which can reduce your risk of getting cervical cancer. And after they had people watch these, the researchers right afterwards measured how much knowledge about cervical cancer the audience had for each of these movies. And they had the same amount of knowledge. But what happened was 6 months later, they went back and asked who got pap smears. And at a much higher rate, the people that had watched the fictional story had actually gotten more pap smears. So this is very powerful proof that storytelling can shift behavior, which is very challenging. And that means it's a good intervention. It is something you can put in front of someone, and it's relatively low cost, not hard to, not hard to get out to the masses, and it shifts the way people think. Um, this one looked at knowledge and attitudes around ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, at The Good Doctor. And just one episode of that show compared to watching a lecture, an informational lecture, resulted in more accurate knowledge and more positive characteristics. So again, something wrapped up in a story where you're just engaged in the story. You probably know you're able to learn much more than you would otherwise. Um, so storytelling is powerful. And finally, why adolescence? Well, it's a really important time period. It's a time of opportunity. The brain science is now telling us that adolescence, this is a second period of plasticity where where the brain is changing rapidly. And we know that interventions, things that you put in front of adolescents, or things that you can really shift the course of their life. So by focusing on storytelling, we can support all adolescents, not just at risk adolescents, but all adolescents. You're developing your identity during adolescence, and we are the only organization that has expertise in industry based on my background. We have academic credibility and an institutional affiliation. We're at UCLA. So we aim to positively impact kids where they are on screens. So let me tell you a bit about our work. Now that you know the why, um, we do research. So we have done a lot of research, and our research is focused on mental health and authentically inclusive representation. And some of our research, this research you see here, was done with partners in the industry. They actually commissioned us to do this research, and the research goes out into the world and it supports storytellers. Part of what we do is we bring storytellers to the table to help us figure out what kind of research will be helpful for them. And these two studies were incredibly helpful and changed. Um, it informed our work and have gotten us a lot of interest in our work. We also pride ourselves in translation. We create tip sheets, we do articles, we've done research reports, we have checklists that help young storytellers make sure that they're thinking about authentic, inclusive representation. We've done a lot of podcasts and live streams. We have all different ways we get our research out there. We write for other organizations. We do a lot of work and have had a really a lot of success with the translational work. We also bring people together in convenings. We do think tanks, which are grant funded. So we rely on philanthropy, but we also have a summit every year. And this is the amazing Tracy Johnson and the amazing Brian Kite, who are deans. And they have joined us for a few years. We really love having them. Um, and we had sponsorships, all of these various sponsorships from industry, with Disney being one of our biggest sponsors. That's my friend Vicky. And we talk about, we usually have about 180, 150 storytellers, and we talk about research and adolescence. We have adolescence as part of it as well. So finally, the big part of our work and the most important our work is adolescent voices, amplifying their voices. So we do that through a virtual program we have called the Youth Media Representation Program. We empower young people. It's virtual. If you have adolescents who are interested in learning more about this program, if you know brothers or sisters or gender fluid kids, we are very open. Queer kids, to talking to them and considering them for our program. What we teach them is how to do research. We teach them how to share the research, which is what we do. And then we also teach them how to share it with storytellers, because we want storytellers to consider adolescence in the work they do. We also do an annual survey of across the country. Last year was our very first one, and we look at what teens say they want to see, what they care about, how they want the industry to think about the media that they do. So we're doing these things in partnership with each other. One part is, working directly with teens. A group of teens that are self-selected come into our um, ecosystem and learn about the work. And then we do a survey that's national across the country to sort of really understand what teens that we may not be able to reach are interested in. So again, adolescence, I didn't mention this. We are often focused on positive thinking, but you're dealing with a lot. You're dealing with climate change. You're dealing with school shootings. You're dealing with homelessness and institutional and systematic racism. It's going to take a lot of work to support people and young people. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed. And when politicians are talking about taking the information away from you, taking your power to use media to unite and get information that you need, it becomes, even though we all know that social media can be overwhelming, some of the news coming at us is too much. It's really important to have young people have access to the information and to be part of the conversation. So we are all about empowerment. There's so many young people using these tools to gather, to bring together other people. And I hope you guys will be thinking about that. You'll study these things. You'll think about coming and working with us. And I hope the week and what you're doing with the undergraduate research. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. Will be a powerful and empowering week. Um, Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our partners. So you saw some names. These are our collaborators. These are professors at all over the world who are interested in our work, who are on our site, and who we reach out to when we have opportunities to work with industry. They work with us on all sorts of things. We also drive impact where youth engage and learn. These are some of the organizations we've worked with. We've really been proud of actually Activision is one of the newest people we're working with. We started with media, traditional media, but then we've moved into YouTube and Twitch and Ninja. Ninja, as you know, the world's largest gamer. We've worked with Activision, public health and education, consumer goods. Really, what we're trying to do is get our messages out about amplifying adolescent voice, what they care about, how to engage them, and how to make sure that the content that is created feels really representative of young people. That's we go wherever we can. We're talking to a podcast company and an international company, all sorts of people. So this is the last slide. I just want to say thank you so much. Here's a QR code if you want to go to our resources. And I want to say thank you again to the undergraduate research group. I'm going to move this down, and so you can get the QR code if you want. And I just want to say thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk, Dr. Uhls. I've now got some questions that I'm going to ask you to share your wisdom with our audience. So first, can you talk a little bit about your non-traditional path to earning your degree in psychology? And what challenges or benefits did you face from pursuing your degree after already establishing your career?
Oh, that's such a good question. And as you know, a little bit about that I talked about in the talk at the front. But and thank you for having me. I think that so the first part was the non-challenging career. Or the challenging. So I basically always followed my passions. I didn't follow a prescriptive path to my career, and I just followed what I was interested in. And at first that was movie. It took me a few years to figure it out. So I didn't really figure it out till I was 25, 26. So that's the first thing to think about. Then I was very interested in movies, so I followed that. Then I was very interested in children and media, so I followed that, and then launched the center and really bridging these worlds, and getting that PhD. So when I was deciding, and so I stopped working and as an executive, and I was producing, but I was also just exploring, what do I want to do now? I've got young kids. I know I don't want to be a movie exec anymore. This producing thing could be okay, but not sure. And I asked myself, what would I do if I could go back in time and have that first day at undergraduate school? What would I've taken? And in fact, I had wanted to take a psychology class when I was at Berkeley. I went to Berkeley, and it was at 8 a.m. on the opposite side of campus. So I was like, nope. and and I was like, well, let me see, let me try it out. So I tried out taking classes, and it took a few years for me to sort of go, okay, I'm going to get a PhD. So, big message is be patient with yourself as you're trying to figure out things. And and so then what happened was I got to the school, and if you read my book, I talk about this. I thought, oh, there'll be people my age. There's nobody my age in the school. Most of them were very, very young. So I definitely felt odd, and I had children, and do all these stats. Um, but what ended up happening, so those were some of the challenges. It says my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me? Oh, I'm back. So those were some of the challenges, but the pluses were I was in developmental psychology, so we were studying children. I had kids. I could talk to the professors in a way younger people couldn't. I was actually very good at multitasking in a way young people didn't know. And also really having had that body of experience that I was then able to apply to my PhD, learning how to produce research, how to communicate research. These were all things I was very, very interested in. And I think they helped me succeed. I ended up winning some awards, one for psychology in action. I won best dissertation in the developmental area. I won a service award. I also won the a national award, Society for Research in Child Development, gave me a national dissertation award. And all of that, I think, is partly because I was able to be really creative, think out of the box, apply what I had already learned, and communicate the science.
Mhm. Great. Thank you so much. What advice would you have to share for recent grads who are looking to get hired and start their careers?
Exactly what I just said. Be patient with yourself. Don't think too much about, unless you absolutely have to, where can I get the most money? Don't think there's just one path. I would say definitely don't jump into graduate school. I got my MBA after a year out of college. It was way too soon. I actually, the PhD was worth it because I'd had many years of experience. I think and I say it to my own daughter who's 23, she's in her first job out of school. This job, your first thing that you do and your second thing you do is really all about learning about what you're good at, what you like. The other thing I would say, while you're in school, make sure to do internships. Make sure to do as many internships as you can so that you can learn what the work world is like and also make relationships. But most of all, just know it's a little bit of a process to figure out. I mean, look, I went back to school at a much later age and was still figuring it out. And then after I graduated, it took me about five years before I launched the center. So I was still figuring it out. And even now, I feel sometimes like I'm still figuring it out. So be patient.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And can you share with us some thoughts on why representation in media is so important? So particularly your studies have shown that one of the key misrepresentations on television is of the American dream. And can you talk a little bit about why and how that is?
Yeah, that's study I love. It didn't get any press, but I think it's a really important study because first of all, it looked at the 10 top shows in 2019 that are adolescents watched. And it must be, one of those was Friends, which was very old. So, it wasn't like it could be changed. But also, so we were looking at race and class, and this was led by a graduate student in the education department. And we were looking at race and class, and what we ended up finding was that the American dream is overrepresented in this kind of content, and I think that's just a trope that everybody uses. I mean, it's a rags to riches story. It's very American. It's pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's a story that is supposed to be inspiring, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it can make you feel like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I achieve this? Look at Obama. He achieved it. So what we found also was that it was overused, but we particularly found that people of color were achieving the American dream at much higher rates than white people, which is actually the exact opposite of what happens in the real world. And so our fear was, if I'm a young person of color and I'm watching a person of color on TV achieve the American dream, and I'm not seeing the barriers, because there are plenty of systemic barriers in there, I'm going to feel like, possibly, why can't I do this? I dropped out of college because I had to take care of my, parents and my siblings, or I had a job, you know, instead of thinking, I did that because of those things, you can think, oh, well, they were able to do it. Why not me? So we really advocate for authentically inclusive representation. Recognize that that is exceptional and that that is challenging and that not everyone achieves it. And we also don't think necessarily, this generation, like the American dream may not be about becoming incredibly wealthy. The American dream might be a completely different dream. So we're interested in that as well.
Okay. So what have you found surprising from your research on adolescent media preferences? Are their results aligned or are they not aligned with what Hollywood portrays?
So we have research study called Teens and Screens. That's our signature research. We started it last year for the first time. We'll do a different iteration of it this year, 2023, and it gets released in the fall in coordination with our fall summit. And what we found last year, which was very surprising, was that adolescents don't want to see aspirational programming. And that is actually what Hollywood always thinks adolescents want. They all want to be rich and famous. They all want to see sort of that good old life we could have. And they only 4% said they wanted that. Nobody wanted to see it. So, and Hollywood totally I mean, I've had so many people say to me, "Oh, aspirational programming, that's what they want, that's what they want." Now, Hollywood even says, though, when you show them that, they're like, "Oh, that's what they say," but they still really want it, and they choose that stuff. But I like to say, like, there's a show, remake or a new version of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If you look at that, that was definitely an aspirational show and, but also sort of comedic and silly. This that we're looking at it again, and obviously Will Smith is hugely successful and is the embodiment of the American dream in some ways, but there it's dramatic, it's serious, it has a lot of issues. You see a lot of the racism, you see mental health issues, and it's a hit. So I do think the audience is pushing away and they want to just see the world as it really is. Um, you know, glossed up a bit because it is, entertainment and with moments of, just being able to escape, but um, with just moments of, the real world.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more question for you. So your work brings together so many different groups and constituencies. So can you share any advice for our students on how to work collaboratively on research?
Yeah, I think to listen. I think young people often think, and listen to wisdom too, as someone who's older. Um, I sometimes do feel like people are rolling their eyes if I say something wrong or they think they know more. And we pride ourselves in really listening and allowing every voice at the table to contribute. But at the same time, I completely know that young people need scaffolding and they need guidance. I mean, the work that I do, I'm training young people to be able to do this work. They don't, even if they have a graduate degree, they really don't know how to do it. And so the more humble you can be, the more you can listen, the more you can realize that, some scientists think that they should be standing on the stage and sharing all the wisdom, or they think that um, if we are sharing science, it can only be shared in a certain format. I think we have to be more flexible. We have to listen to those people who can, like I say, entertainment media, like they know how to entertain and engage young people. Scientists know how what works to help young people grow healthy and strong, and then bring the adolescents into the conversations because they have the lived experience. And when you bring them in, um, you'll have you know, just a voice at the table that's not there. And I think one of the reasons social media has become so huge versus traditional media is because traditional storytelling, they're not really writing something that feels reflective of the modern adolescent experience. And by bringing in adolescents into their work that aren't their children or their memory of when they were adolescents themselves, they will create content that will resonate with their audience. Um, so I kind of went a little bit off what to tell young people, but I just think to work with a team, you have to be humble, you have to listen, you have to not be sensitive, don't be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You really don't. It's better to make mistakes. Think about John Wooden. Like make mistakes. You're not learning, and um, everybody has something to offer and try to find the good in people rather than, tear them down and take on the project by yourself.
Okay, well, that's my last question for you. Thank you so much, Dr. Uhls, for joining us today at Undergraduate Research Week.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish I could have been there in person, but I am very happy I'm going to be in Europe traveling with my children. So, um, um, but I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for asking me. See
Thank
you.
you.